Right, so if you're ready to move on then, we're carrying on the same sheet really that we've just put the Hindu beliefs on, but this time we're looking at Hindu practices. What do Hindus do to try to get back to Brahman? Remember, they believe that we're all part of God essentially. We've all got an Atman within us. How do they get back to that? And everything really about Hindu practices are to do with what they call Sanatana Dharma. Sanatana Dharma just means eternal truth. So they believe that the eternal truth is that we're all part of God, we're all connected in that way, and they must then, each soul must find its way back to God through and break free of the cycle of samsara. And there are different ways to do that. And most of this learning can be understood by understanding the 4 yogas. So I'll just put 4 yogas. And the word yoga just means union with divine, union with the divine. So if you're a Hindu, the 4 yogas are the 4 pathways to God, the 4 ways in which you will find that union. So the first one, like most religions, almost all religions, they show devotion to God. That's one way to get close to it. And in Hinduism, they call that Bhakti Yoga. And it is the path of devotion. The path of devotion. So as we already know, these images of God, sometimes they're in sort of form like this. This is she's broken her hand off. Actually, it's a bit sad. But this one is Lakshmi, and it's a murti of Lakshmi. Murti means image of God, and most Hindus will have these in their homes, or sometimes if you go to a Hindu temple, there'll be huge murtis. And some murtis are very small, like tiny little metal ones normally that they will use to worship. And different Hindus choose to worship different deities for different reasons. Certain families have ones that they worship more than others. Like I said earlier, Ganesh is a very popular murti or deity to have. So Bhakti Yoga mainly involves showing devotion to that through worship. So there's different ways to worship. I'll probably forget some of them, but one of the main ones is called puja. And puja is a ritual of devotion which includes making offerings to deities. And this, for example, is a puja tray. You probably saw one of these in Year 8 when you learnt about Hindu worship. But there are little pots to put offerings into, and this is an arati lamp where they will light little candle type things to create a fire. They use a bell to focus their mind on God. I won't be able to get it open, but there's like a red paste that you can use, and they put some of that on their forehead to represent clarity of vision and wisdom. Can't get it open. Probably a good thing, because otherwise I'd have red stuff on my head for the rest of the day. But that's a puja ritual. And other things are mantras, which are kind of like prayers chanted repeatedly to focus the mind of the worshipper on Brahman. When we went to a temple that focuses on Vishnu as their main deity, they say a mantra about Hare Krishna. So they say Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Rama. I forgot how it goes, but it includes Rama and Krishna in the mantra, and they'll say it many times. And they'll use mala beads as well to count the amount of mantras they might say. One person, when we went to the Hindu temple, told us that their set of mala beads had 108 beads on it, and because that was Krishna's favourite number, and she said that that chant that goes on for about, 20 seconds, but she'll repeat that 108 times in one session and then do it again later. So again, it's showing devotion to these deities and then ultimately to Brahma. I mentioned the fire, the Arati lamp. I think I spelt that wrong. And if you go to a Hindu worship, this will be lit, and devotees will come in and sort of almost like just try and participate in the essence. They'll get the fire, wave their hands over it and sort of spread it around. Incense does a similar thing. So incense sticks are burnt. Again, the whole point of this kind of worship and devotion is to awaken your senses. So there'll be music, drums, candles, incense. So to appeal to all the senses. Food offerings will be given and then given to the poor later. And again, it's to awaken the person's understanding to Brahman, to the universe. So that's why Hindu worship engages the senses in that way. Another one, the second pathway to God that I'll talk about is Jnana Yoga. And that is the path of knowledge. So how do Hindus get knowledge about Brahman? Well, one way is to read holy books. The most famous holy books are called the Vedas and the Upanishads. And I remember learning to start to teach GCSE Hinduism. I downloaded the Upanishads on my Kindle on my phone, and it's not a very long. The one I got wasn't a very long text, but it just explained really quite clearly in lots of sort of small verses what Brahman is and how they view God. And this wisdom has been developed over thousands of years of people, meditating, studying it. Coming to an understanding of Brahman. So it's not just holy books that Hindus can learn knowledge from. They might also have a spiritual teacher called a guru. And they might learn from different parts of nature, like the lotus flower. Buddhism uses a lotus flower in its spirituality as well. Gu and Ru mean darkness and light. So a guru is someone who will bring you from darkness, not understanding, to light, to enlightenment. So that's why in Buddhism they like the lotus flower in particular, because it grows through mud, up through the water, and out into the open air. So the lotus flower, once it gets there, I can't draw one, but I had a go. And the lotus flower, once it is there, it has gone on a long journey. In a similar way, an Atman has gone through a long journey of not understanding, and then finally developing an awareness of Brahman, and then actually joining Brahman. And a guru means going from darkness to light. That's what any teacher will do. That's why guru is kind of like another word for teacher, I suppose. You've got maths next, haven't you? So when your maths teacher comes in and says, how do you work out the area of a triangle? And you might have forgotten. You might go, oh, I don't know. And so you're in sort of darkness about that idea. They'll remind you and go, hey, it's base times the height divided by 2. Boom, job done. So they'll have brought you into light. They will have lifted your mind out of an unawareness of mathematical concepts to knowing all about them and understanding the maths world in a bit clearer way. So that's what a guru is. It's someone who will bring you from darkness to light. So when Buddha meditated, didn't know the meaning of life, eventually arose through that murkiness into an understanding. And it's handy then that that's the third yoga is called Astanga Yoga. And that means meditation. What the Hindus do when they meditate, well, again, if the Atman is the element of us that is closest to Brahman, then the meditation is a similar journey. When you meditate, the aim is to block out all of your other distractions and focus on what you really are. And according to Hindus, what we really are is Brahman at the heart of us. So when you meditate, and whether you meditate religiously or whether you just do it, as a secular thing, just to get a better sense of well-being, what you're doing is you're blocking or getting rid of all the clutter out of your consciousness, out of your understanding. So you focus and you say, right, forget about what I'm having for tea later. Forget about slating people on Facebook and getting into arguments. Forget about this. So you forget about all of that stuff, and then it's like peeling off the layers of an onion. You then get to the next level. The next thing is things concerned with who you are and what you're doing in this life. What is my ego about? So, no distractions, no ego. Eventually, no self. Hindus believe that your sense of self is permanent. Because, look, once you die, you're going to have a different self anyway. When I die, my next incarnation probably won't care if Man City win the league or not, or they probably won't be fussed about whether England win the World Cup. They won't have the same cares as me. So those things aren't attached. They're not eternal. They're just temporary things associated with this life. But the ultimate thing is the Atman. And that's why if you peel away all the layers, you get to discover who you really are. And that's what meditation's for, if you're a Hindu. And finally, last one, Karma Yoga is the path of action. Action in the world. We already spoke about karma up here. Karma being having good and bad consequences dependent on your actions. So Karma Yoga is all about promoting good actions in the world. So what kinds of stuff do they do? Well, same as Christianity really, charity work is a big one. They look after the poor and oppressed and downtrodden people. How can we help them to bring themselves up? And also Hindus value the environment a lot as well. So for example, they have cow sanctuaries called Goshalas. And they believe that cows, are very important animals. They also look after trees. There's a bit in a textbook that tells you about how they had a movement where they all protect trees, because they believe that trees have Atmans as well. So the Hindu understanding is that because everything is connected and everything has an Atman, that means everything's connected and is part of Brahman. So the more they look out for these things, the more they're benefiting Brahman. And it's an act of worship. So different Hindus might have different ideas about which of these paths is the best one. And probably they all are. But it's the same. It's the same with any religion. Some Christians think that going out and and having a village fete and raising money for a charity is just as important as reading the Bible and learning about God and Jesus. But, you know, it's rare that someone will have the time to do all of these 4 paths to the extent, which is why some focus in on certain ones. So some Hindus are total devotees. Some lose themselves in meditation massively. Some people get into such deep meditation that they do extreme things to negate their bodily self to get to an understanding of who they are. And so, for example, one guy put his arm in the air one day and said, right, as an act of devotion and to show that my body and my current life is not important and my soul is most important, I'm going to put my arm in the air. And he did for 40 years, right? And so, you know, his arm gradually died. No blood got to it. So if you see him now, I think you can look him up on the internet. I forgot his name, but just type in Sadhu who put his arm in the air for 40 years. It's like a tiny shriveled stick and his fingernails carried on growing into spirals, and he just sacrificed his arm. And you might think, well, that's a bit extreme, but he believed that his body is not important and this self is not important. What's important is where he's going next. He's fully intent on getting to moksha. So some do immense acts of physical negation. There's another one who stood up for 12 years, just didn't sit down, doesn't really sleep. So again, you know, these are gurus who can be learnt from, because they're proving massively that they are committed to this. So yeah. Anyway, lastly, final couple of things really are that Hindus also go on pilgrimages. One of the most popular pilgrimage sites is the Ganges, the river Ganges, and in particular a city called Varanasi. And there they have steps going down to the Ganges called Ghats, and there you can bathe in the Ganges, and lots of Hindus choose to do that. Lots have their ashes spread in the river as well, because again, being cremated helps release the soul and shows that the body is not what's important. And so there, that's a particular important place. Festivals, we've already spoken about Diwali. Festival of Lights, celebrate when Rama and Sita were victorious and came back from exile. There's another one called Holi, which is the paint festival of colour. It's a spring festival, so it's celebrating the return of life. But again, in Hinduism, there's a demoness called Holika, and the festival sort of celebrates a story where Holika is defeated. A bit like how in Christianity there's that eternal struggle between God and the devil, or light and darkness. And so Hindus celebrate that one. And sort of in between a pilgrimage and a festival is called the Kumbh Mela. And don't worry so much about this yet, because I'm going to show you a video in September or whenever we come back about this. And it's kind of a festival that's celebrated every 4 years, I think. But it goes around different sites. Maybe it's 3 years. I do get mixed up on that. But certainly every 12 years it's celebrated in a massive place where they build pretty much a whole city to participate in that festival. And they do some awesome things there. And just about, I've got 10 minutes. So the final thing to understand about Hindu practices, hope I haven't forgotten anything, But the final thing is this word called Varnashrama Dharma. It's probably the longest word in the whole course, Varnashrama Dharma. But all you need to really know at this stage is that it just means, Dharma means duty, because Sanatana Dharma is the eternal duties that all Hindus have, which is these things. You know, respect the environment, worship God, learn about God, care for each other. So that's Sanatana Dharma, but Varnashrama Dharma is the different duties associated by different roles in society and different stages of your life. So essentially there are 4 Varnas and 4 Ashramas. I just want to make sure I get it right, which is which one. Okay, so it's Varnas are different roles in society. This is kind of a bit controversial because in Hindu culture, the holy people are viewed as being at the top. They have the role of being close to God and learning about God, and they're the ones that are going to get to moksha. So if you get reincarnated as a holy person, then you're pretty much there. But other Varnas have other roles in society, and they kind of organised into a bit of a hierarchy. So, for example, there are workers, you know, down here, and merchants and warriors. And this is just kind of, it's viewed as a bit of an old-fashioned way of looking at the world now, where we have different people divided into different groups. But it's a bit like the class system in Western society, where you have like labourers, holy people, merchants and people who own the businesses. And it used to be thought that if you got good karma, you'd reincarnate into a higher class of a higher Varna. But there are laws now, and there's a more and more progressive sort of thinking to try and get rid of this, because people used to use it to discriminate against other people. And if you were like at the bottom of society, you weren't even given a Varna. You were just come into the class called the untouchables. So if somebody was, and it kind of has been used to discriminate against people, because they'd say, oh, you're an untouchable. Oh, that's because you did bad things in your last life, you know, so it's kind of your fault that you're there. So it stops people trying to change society by sort of justifying, you know, spiritually why it's the case. So it's pretty controversial, and you don't need to know too much about it. But anyway, the other 4 things are the ashramas. So you have certain duties, just like you have certain duties if you're in one of these varnas. So your holy duty is to, you know, become a guru and live a spiritual life. Warriors fight and keep order. Merchants increase trade and economy. And workers, you know, get your head down and get working. But ashramas are the stages of life. So you folks now will be in the first of those stages, which is the student stage. And in a way, that's kind of true. That is universal, that young people are required to learn. Pretty much in whatever society you go to, young people's job is to learn and grow in their understanding of the world. So that's what you're at now. Then the other ashrama is the householder ashrama. And your role there is to settle down and have a family, have a household, you know. And that comes with its own sort of list of duties, I suppose. And then the retirement stage, where you kind of take a step back, become a wise elder of the community. and you don't work, and finally there's the kind of, it's called the world renouncing stage. And many Hindus, when they enter into this stage, give up their possessions, they go and live a very simple spiritual life, pretty much to get ready for the next reincarnation. They'll renounce their sort of role in society and kind of become a wilderness dwelling spiritual being, to get ready for, hopefully, they've got their fingers crossed that when they die they won't reincarnate and they'll escape the cycle and go and be at one with Brahman again. Right, again, well done for focusing, and I can see the notes that you're making are awesome things. And have you got any questions about Hindu practices? We've gone through so much, but any questions about any of that? No, right. Fantastic. Quick shout out to Jamil, who's here, who was keen to be mentioned in the video. So, well done. And thanks to Ellie, who's providing the notes for today as well. She's done some excellent notes that I'll include on the email as well. Right, let's end that there.